He hit a poor woman. The impact echoed through the empty street, a sickening thud that froze time. But what happened next changed his life forever. Chinedu Okafor, a powerful billionaire known for control, speed, and precision, stepped out of his sleek black car with shaking hands, staring down at the fragile body of a poor woman he had just hit. Her worn clothes soaked in dust, her face pale but strangely peaceful. She wasn't just anyone. There was something about her, something that didn't match her poverty, something that made his chest tighten with an unfamiliar fear. But why did this poor woman, lying helpless on the ground, seem connected to a past Chinedu had buried for years? And as sirens began to rise in the distance, would saving her life cost him everything he had built? Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It gives me the strength and encouragement to keep writing beautiful stories. The tires screeched too late. Chinedu Okafor had always been a man who controlled outcomes. Billion naira deals, corporate takeovers, high-stakes risks. Everything in his life moved according to his will. But that night, on a dimly lit road just outside the city, control slipped through his fingers in a single, irreversible moment. His car came to a violent halt. Silence followed. For a few seconds, Chinedu didn't move. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, his knuckles turned white. His breath came in sharp, uneven bursts as his mind struggled to process what had just happened. Then he saw her. Through the cracked windshield, under the pale glow of a flickering streetlight, lay the body of a poor woman he had just hit. His heart dropped. No, 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 he muttered under his breath, panic creeping into his voice. Chinedu threw the door open and rushed out, his polished shoes scraping against the rough asphalt. The cold night air hit his face, but he barely felt it. His entire focus locked onto the woman lying motionless on the ground. She looked small, fragile, almost invisible against the wide, empty road. Her clothes were worn and faded, the kind that spoke of long days and harder nights. One of her sandals had slipped off, lying a few feet away. A thin bag rested beside her, its contents spilled. Just a few basic items, nothing of value. Nothing, except her life. Chinedu dropped to his knees beside her, his expensive suit brushing against the dirt without a second thought. Hey, can you hear me? His voice trembled, shouting something that had never happened before. No response. For a moment, fear gripped him tighter than anything he had ever experienced in business or life. Then, a faint movement. Her fingers twitched. Chinedu exhaled sharply, relief and dread colliding inside him. Stay with me. Please, he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. He gently lifted her head, noticing a small cut near her temple. Blood trickled down slowly, but it wasn't what unsettled him the most. It was her face. Even in her fragile state, there was something familiar. Chinedu frowned. Where have I seen her before? The thought flickered in his mind, but he quickly pushed it aside. This wasn't the time. He reached for his phone with trembling hands and dialed emergency services. Yes, there's been an accident, he said quickly. A woman. I hit a woman. She's alive but barely conscious. Send help. Now. As he ended the call, his gaze returned to her. Her breathing was shallow, weak, but still there. Chinedu removed his coat and carefully placed it over her, shielding her from the cold night air. I won't let anything happen to you, he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was reassuring her or himself. In the distance, faint sirens began to rise. Time seemed to stretch endlessly between each second. Chinedu sat there, beside the poor woman he had hit, his mind racing faster than it ever had in a boardroom. But this wasn't a deal he could negotiate. This wasn't a situation he could control with money or influence. This was different. This was real. And for the first time in years, Chinedu felt powerless. His eyes drifted back to her face again. That same strange feeling returned. Familiarity. A connection he couldn't explain. His chest tightened. "Who are you?" he murmured. The sirens grew louder now, red and blue lights beginning to flicker in the distance. Help was coming. But something told Chinedu that this moment, this accident, was not just a random event. It felt like the beginning of something far bigger. Something that would reach into parts of his life he had long tried to forget. As the ambulance finally arrived and paramedics rushed toward them, Chinedu stood frozen for a brief second before stepping back. They lifted her carefully onto a stretcher, checking her pulse, calling out instructions. "Is she going to be okay?" Chinedu asked urgently, his voice breaking through his usual composed tone. One of the paramedics glanced at him. "Ja, we'll do everything we can. You should come with us." Chinedu didn't hesitate. As he climbed into the ambulance, his eyes never left her. The poor woman he had hit. The woman who somehow felt tied to a past he couldn't quite remember. The woman whose fate was now connected to his. And as the ambulance doors slammed shut, speeding into the night, one question echoed in Chinedu's mind louder than the sirens themselves. Why did saving her life feel like it might destroy his? The ambulance cut through the night with a piercing urgency, its siren slicing through traffic as Chinedu Okafor sat frozen beside the stretcher. The poor woman he had hit lay motionless, her chest rising faintly beneath the thin oxygen mask strapped across her face. Every shallow breath she took felt like a countdown, like something fragile slipping through his fingers. "Pulse is weak," one of the paramedics said, adjusting the IV line. "We need to stabilize her before we arrive." Chinedu swallowed hard, his throat dry. For the first time in his life, money meant nothing. Influence meant nothing. All the power he had built over decades could not guarantee that this poor woman, this stranger he had hit, would survive the next few minutes. His eyes remained fixed on her face. That same unsettling feeling crept back in. Familiarity. It didn't make sense. He leaned forward slightly, studying her features more closely. The curve of her cheek, the shape of her nose, the faint line above her eyebrow. Something about her felt like a memory trying to break through a locked door in his mind. But before he could grasp it, "Sir, we need space," a paramedic said firmly. Chinedu quickly leaned back, running a hand through his hair, frustration building inside him. The ambulance finally came to a sharp stop at the hospital entrance. Doors flung open, and within seconds, she was rushed out, surrounded by a team of medical staff. "Head trauma, possible internal bleeding. Prepare emergency room," someone called out. Chinedu jumped out after them, his expensive shoes hitting the hospital floor as he followed closely behind. "Doctor," he called out, "do whatever it takes. Just save her." The medical team didn't stop. They pushed her straight through the double doors of the emergency unit, leaving Chinedu standing outside, alone. The doors shut in front of him, and just like that, he was locked out. Time slowed to a crawl. Chinedu paced the hospital corridor, his footsteps echoing against the sterile walls. Nurses moved past him, doctors exchanged urgent conversations, Machines beeped from distant rooms, but none of it registered fully. His mind was stuck on one thing: the poor woman he had hit. Who was she? And why did she feel so important? He stopped pacing and leaned against the wall, exhaling deeply. For a brief moment, he closed his eyes, and then a memory flickered. A dusty street, laughter, a younger version of himself, carefree, unknown, far from wealth and power, and a woman. Her face blurred, but her presence felt warm, familiar. Chinedu's eyes snapped open. No, he whispered under his breath. It couldn't be. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought, but it lingered, growing stronger with each passing second. So before he could think further, a doctor stepped out of the emergency room. Chinedu rushed forward immediately. "Doctor, how is she?" The doctor removed his gloves, his expression serious. "She's alive, but barely," he said. "She lost a lot of blood. We've managed to stabilize her for now, but the next few hours are critical." Chinedu nodded quickly. "Whatever she needs, money, specialists, equipment, I'll provide it. Just make sure she survives." The doctor studied him for a moment. "You must know her well." Chinedu hesitated. That question hit harder than expected. "No," he admitted quietly, "but I'm responsible." The doctor gave a small nod. "We'll do our best." As the doctor walked away, Chinedu stood there, replaying those words in his mind. "I'm responsible." The weight of it pressed heavily on his chest. For years, Chinedu had built a life where consequences could be managed, avoided, controlled. But this was different. This was human. Hours passed. The hospital grew quieter as the night stretched on. Chinedu sat in the waiting area, his jacket draped over the chair beside him, his eyes tired but alert. He hadn't left. He couldn't. Every time he thought about walking away, something pulled him back. That same invisible connection. Around 3 a.m., a nurse approached him. "Sir?" Chinedu looked up immediately. "Yes?" "She's been moved to a private room. You can see her now, but she's still unconscious." Chinedu stood up without hesitation. "Take me to her." The room was quiet. Soft beeping from the monitor filled the space as Chinedu stepped inside slowly. There she was, the poor woman he had hit. Now lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by machines, her body still, fragile, but alive. Chinedu walked closer, his steps careful, almost hesitant. He stood beside her bed, staring down at her. Up close, the feeling intensified, stronger than before. He reached out slowly, then paused, before gently resting his hand on the edge of the bed. "Who are you?" he whispered again. Silence answered, but something inside him refused to let it go. His gaze drifted to the small table beside her bed. Her belongings. The same thin bag from the road. A nurse must have placed it there. Chinedu hesitated for a moment, then picked it up. Inside were simple things. Worn-out clothes, a small wrapper of food, and then a photograph, old, faded. Chinedu froze. His fingers tightened around it as his eyes locked onto the image. It was a picture of a younger woman, holding the hand of a little boy. The boy was smiling brightly, carefree, full of life. Chinedu's breath caught in his throat, because that boy was him. The photo slipped slightly in his trembling hands. "No, this isn't possible," he whispered. His heart began to race, his mind flooded with memories he had buried for years. That woman in the photo, the one standing beside his younger self. She looked just like the poor woman lying in the hospital bed. Older, worn by life, but unmistakably the same. Chinedu staggered back slightly, shock crashing over him. "It can't be," he said, his voice barely audible, but deep down, he already knew. The poor woman he had hit was not a stranger. And as Chinedu turned slowly to look at her again, a chilling realization settled deep in his chest. If she was who he thought she was, then everything he believed about his past was a lie. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It gives me the strength and encouragement to keep writing beautiful stories. Chinedu couldn't breathe. The hospital room suddenly felt too small, too tight, like the walls were closing in on him. His eyes remained locked on the poor woman he had hit, the woman now lying unconscious before him, and then slowly drifted back to the photograph trembling in his hand. The boy in that picture, smiling, innocent, untouched by the harshness of the world. That boy was him, and the woman holding his hand. His chest tightened painfully. "Amaka?" he whispered, the name slipping out before he could stop it. The sound of it felt foreign, yet deeply familiar, like a forgotten song returning after years of silence. Amaka, the woman who raised him, the woman he had spent years trying to forget, the woman he believed had abandoned him. Chinedu staggered back slightly, gripping the edge of the table for support as memories began to crash into him, uninvited, relentless. He was 8 years old again, hungry, barefoot, standing beside Amaka in a crowded market. "Stay close to me, Chinedu," she had said, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm not going anywhere," he had replied with a small smile, gripping her hand tightly. Back then, she was everything to him, not just a mother, but his entire world. She worked endlessly, selling whatever she could just to feed them. Some nights, she went to bed without eating, pretending she wasn't hungry so he could have the last portion. And he believed her, because that's what love looked like. Sacrifice. Chinedu squeezed his eyes shut, trying to push the memories away, but they only grew stronger. Faster, sharper, the day everything changed. Rain poured heavily that evening. He remembered standing under a broken shelter, waiting for her. She had told him to stay there, told him she would be back. But she never came. Hours turned into a night. The night turned into days, and the days turned into years. To the world, he was just another abandoned child, and to himself, he carried one belief that shaped everything he became. She left me. Chinedu opened his eyes slowly, his breathing uneven. "But why now?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "Why you? Why like this?" He turned to look at her again. Amaka. Older now. Life had not been kind to her. The strength he remembered in her eyes had been replaced by exhaustion, the kind that came from years of struggle, pain, and survival. And suddenly, guilt, heavy, crushing, unavoidable. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. "I built everything, because of what you did," he muttered, his voice shaking. "I told myself I'd never be weak again. Never depend on anyone, never trust anyone." His voice cracked. "And now, you're here?" The poor woman he had hit. The woman he blamed for his broken childhood. The woman who unknowingly shaped the man he became. Lying helpless. Because of him. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Chinedu turned sharply. A nurse stepped in quietly. "Sir, visiting time is almost over. You should get some rest." Chinedu shook his head immediately. "I'm not leaving." The nurse hesitated, then nodded gently. She's stable for now, but she still hasn't regained consciousness. Chinedu glanced back at Amaka. Will she wake up? We don't know yet, the nurse replied softly. Head injuries can be unpredictable. She paused, then added, Sometimes, patients hear more than we think. If there's something you want to say, you should say it. Chinedu didn't respond. The nurse gave him one last look before quietly leaving the room. Silence returned, heavy, unforgiving. Chinedu stood there for a long moment, then slowly walked back to the bedside. He stared at Amaka, at the woman who had once been his entire world, at the woman he had spent years resenting. His jaw tightened. There was a time. He began slowly, his voice low, controlled. When I needed you. No response, only the steady beep of the monitor. I waited for you, he continued, his voice growing heavier. I believed you'd come back, every single day, I believed. His hands clenched into fists. But you didn't. The words hung in the air, sharp, painful. Years of buried emotions finally finding their way out. You left me with nothing, he said, his voice rising slightly. Do you even know what that did to me? Do you know what it took for me to survive? His breathing grew heavier. Anger, pain, confusion, all colliding at once. And now, he gestured toward her weak body. Now you show up like this? As the poor woman I hit? He let out a bitter laugh. Life has a twisted sense of humor. Then suddenly, a faint sound. Chinedu froze. He turned slowly. Amaka's fingers moved, just slightly, but enough. His heart skipped. Amaka, he called out, stepping closer. Her lips parted faintly, a weak breath escaped, and then a whisper, so soft it almost didn't exist. Chinedu. The sound hit him like lightning, his name, from her, after all these years. Chinedu's eyes widened, shock washing over him. She knows me, he whispered. His chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't just pain. It was something deeper, something more dangerous. Truth. He leaned closer, his voice urgent now. Amaka, can you hear me? It's me, Chinedu. Her eyes didn't open, but a single tear slipped down the side of her face, and in that moment, everything changed. Because that tear wasn't just pain. It was recognition. Chinedu stepped back slowly, his mind spinning. If she remembered him, if she knew who he was, then one question remained. The question he had carried his entire life. The question that shaped his anger, his ambition, his identity. Why did she leave? He looked at her again, his expression no longer just anger, but something more complex, conflicted, broken, searching. Wake up, he said quietly, his voice firm now. You're going to wake up, and you're going to tell me the truth. The machines continued their steady rhythm. The room remained still. But deep down, Chinedu knew. The answers he had been running from all his life were finally within reach. And as he stood there, staring at the poor woman he had hit, the woman who turned out to be his past, his pain, and possibly his greatest truth. One thought echoed louder than anything else. What if everything I believed about her was wrong? The night stretched into morning, but sleep never came for Chinedu. He remained in the chair beside the hospital bed, his eyes fixed on Amaka, the poor woman he had hit, the woman who had unknowingly shaped his entire life. The machines continued their steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Each sound reminded him she was still alive, still here, still holding on to something. And so was he. Sunlight slowly filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room. It felt strangely calm, almost too calm for everything that was about to unfold. Chinedu leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped tightly together. "Why didn't you come back?" he asked quietly. His voice no longer filled with anger, but something deeper. Hurt, confusion, a lifetime of unanswered questions. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, a shift, a faint movement. Chinedu's head snapped up. Amaka's fingers twitched again, stronger this time. Her breathing changed slightly, and slowly. Her eyes began to open. Chinedu stood up immediately, his heart pounding hard against his chest. "Amaka," he called softly. Her eyelids fluttered, struggling against the weight of exhaustion. The light seemed too bright for her at first, but gradually, her gaze settled. And then, she saw him. Chinedu, her son. Tears filled her eyes instantly. "You," she whispered weakly. Chinedu stepped closer, his voice tight. "Yes, it's me." A fragile silence fell between them, heavy with years of absence. Amaka tried to move, but winced in pain. "Don't," Chinedu said quickly. "You're injured. Just lie still." But her eyes never left his. "I thought—" She struggled to speak, her voice breaking. "I thought I would never see you again." Chinedu swallowed hard. "You almost didn't," he replied, his tone conflicted. "I hit you." A tear slipped down her cheek. "But you stayed," she whispered. That simple statement hit him harder than anything else. Because she was right. He could have walked away, used his power to erase the situation. But he didn't. Chinedu took a deep breath. "This is not what matters right now," he said, his voice steady but intense. "What matters is the truth." Amaka's expression shifted slightly. "You remember me?" he continued. "You said my name." She nodded weakly. "I never forgot you. Chinedu, not for a single day." The words landed heavily. Chinedu's jaw tightened. "Then why?" he asked, the question finally breaking free. "Why did you leave me?" Silence. Amaka closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering the strength to face something painful. "I didn't leave you," she said softly. Chinedu's brows furrowed. "That's not true," he snapped. "I waited for you. You told me to stay, and you never came back." Her breathing grew uneven. "That day," she began slowly, "I went to get food for you. You hadn't eaten since morning." Chinedu's expression flickered. "I remember," he said quietly. "I was crossing the road when—" Her voice trembled. "A car hit me." The words hung in the air. Chinedu froze. "What?" he whispered. "I lost consciousness," she continued. "When I woke up, I was in a hospital. No money, no family, no way to find you." Tears streamed down her face now. "I tried, Chinedu. I tried to come back, but by the time I returned, you were gone." Chinedu took a step back, his heart racing. "No." He shook his head. "No, that's not possible." "I searched for you," she said desperately. "For years. I went everywhere, asked everyone, but it was like you disappeared." Her voice broke completely. "I thought I lost you forever." The room felt like it was spinning. Chinedu's mind struggled to process what he was hearing. All these years, all this time, he believed one thing: she abandoned me. But now, "You're saying," his voice cracked, "you didn't leave me?" Amaka shook her head weakly. Never. The truth hit him like a wave. Sudden, overwhelming, crushing. Every decision he had made, every wall he had built, every ounce of anger he carried, was based on a lie. Chinedu turned away, running his hands over his face, his breathing heavy. I built my life, hating you, he admitted quietly. I told myself I would never be like you, never be weak, never be left behind again. His voice broke. But you didn't leave. He let out a shaky breath. I was wrong. Amaka watched him, her eyes filled with both pain and love. You were just a child, she said softly. You believed what you saw. Chinedu turned back to her slowly. And now? He asked. What am I supposed to believe now? She gave a faint, tired smile. The truth. Silence settled between them again. But this time it felt different. Lighter, honest, real. Chinedu walked back to her bedside, his steps slower now, more deliberate. I spent my whole life becoming someone powerful, he said, someone untouchable. He looked down at her, but one moment, one accident, changed everything. Amaka reached out weakly, her fingers brushing against his hand. And maybe, she whispered, it brought you back to what truly matters. Chinedu stared at her hand for a moment, then gently held it, tightly, like he never wanted to let go again. Days passed. Amaka's condition improved gradually under Chinedu's care. The best doctors, the best treatment, everything he could provide, he did. But this time, it wasn't about money. It was about redemption. About healing something broken long ago. Chinedu visited her every day. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they sat in silence. But every moment mattered. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't running. One evening, as the sun set outside the hospital window, Chinedu stood beside her bed once again. You know, he said quietly, I used to think hitting that poor woman was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Amaka looked at him. But now, she asked softly. He gave a small, genuine smile. Now I know. It changed my life forever. She smiled back, her eyes warm. And maybe, she said, it gave us another chance. Chinedu nodded slowly. A second chance. Not just to rebuild what was lost, but to understand it, to forgive it, to finally let go of the past. And as he stood there, holding the hand of the poor woman he had once hit, the woman who turned out to be his mother, Chinedu realized something powerful. Sometimes, life breaks you in the most unexpected way, not to destroy you, but to lead you back to what you were never supposed to lose. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It gives me the strength and encouragement to keep writing beautiful stories.